India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi when he holds an informal two-day summit with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. This is in the central Chinese city of Wuhan. Soon after he arrived on his special aircraft, a convoy of 28 cars escorted the Prime Minister to his hotel. The two leaders are seeking to reset bilateral ties post the Doklam crisis in August last year. Before leaving for China, the Prime Minister, in a statement, said he hopes to discuss a range of bilateral issues of global importance with Chinese leader Xi Jinping. Despite the informal nature of the summit, both leaders are expected to spend a considerable amount of time with each other. Reports suggest that they will meet 6 separate times during the next 2 days. The possibility of a reset in India and China ties seems to have got a reaction from Pakistan as well. The Foreign Office in Islamabad issuing a statement saying that the friendship between China and Pakistan is time-tested. We still have senior Indian diplomat Arun Singh with us, and we'll be joined from China as well by an independent strategist, and Ranade, the president of the Center for China Analysis and Study, also joins us. Mr. Ranade, just going back into history a little bit, when you look at, say, the meetings between Jawaharlal Nehru and Zhou Enlai, I believe the 1954 summit, we actually had to fly him in on a flight. They didn't have aircraft at that time. Now, things have really changed since then. But would you still say it is continuity with change? Continuity in the sense that the 1988 Rajiv Gandhi Deng Xiaoping agreement actually is the framework, but global situations have also changed.
Yeah, certainly. Global situations have changed. China's position has changed. It is now, in contention for becoming the probably premier power in the world. We are on a rise and we are more confident. So I think a lot of things have changed. But some things have not changed, which is what happened when Prime Minister Nehru and Zhou Enlai met, what happened when Rajiv Gandhi and Deng Xiaoping met. There were nice words, there were very pleasant hopes that were spelt out, but the relationship really didn't take off between the two. So here I hope that, with both of them now in a, shall I say, in a different position, both of them having made clear their vision for their country. I mean, I think in this case, both leaders have done so. Yeah. Possibly that might pave the way for a new, new kind of start for the relationship. But let me also say that I think, we need to look at it a bit cautiously, in the sense that time will tell whether we are moving ahead or not. There should be no instant expectations, though many of us do feel that certain things could have happened. But let's wait and see. I think it's
that's how the Indian side has played it as well. They call it expectation management. Ambassador Singh, is it this? There's no doubt. If you go back again into history, when JFK met Nikita Khrushchev, he said it's better to meet at a summit than at the brink. Now we've seen how things have changed just over less than 12 months.
So there have been several meetings, for example, between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi.
I think I was counting them 13 overall, I mean, including the bilaterals and the multilaterals.
Right. Or even if you take Prime Minister Modi's visits to China, this is his 3rd visit, and then a 4th visit is planned in about a month's time. So and they've been meeting at multilateral events. So there has been interactions. In the context of Doklam, there was a sense that the resolution process started after Prime Minister Modi and President Xi met on the margins of the G20. And then from there the message went and signals went that both sides needed to work to resolve this issue. So high-level interaction at the leaders' level is important to set the context and tone of the relationship. So I think this particular informal summit has been approached by both sides because both find advantage in this. Otherwise, it would certainly not have happened. As a way to set a new tone, a new context for the relationship after the intense difficulty we had over the past year with the situation in Doklam, with China blocking us in the nuclear supplies group, preventing the listing of Masood Azhar as a global terrorist at the UN, and our taking a very firm position on the Belt and Road Initiative, pointing out the difficulties. So we have to see that after this, after the new tone, after the deep conversation at the leaders' level, what happens after that?
What happens after that? Mr. Grande, we're already having indications in their reports. It may not be announced now, but we've seen the Ministry of Defense there just today issuing a statement which seems to hint at, say, restarting of military ties or military exercises between the two, which were stalled after Doklam, and other such movements that will come, if not at this summit, soon after.
Yeah, they are small steps, but they are good steps. In fact, we used to have these hand-in-hand exercises between China and India, but the Chinese had not given an indication that they are going to resume this. So that's a good sign if it does happen, and I think it will. It's in their interest. But just to pick up from what Ambassador Arun Singh said, we have had, in fact, since April 2015, fairly strained relations, and in fact they've been headed, if I may say, on a downward spiral. So to that extent, this is a good move. It at least arrests it, if not tries to lift it back up. And I think on both sides there were compulsions why we went in for this. So what you're saying about this small step is a good thing. If we enhance, I would say, the sharing of information on river waters like Brahmaputra, and I'm using the word enhance rather than just data sharing.
Correct.
Things like that, if we start doing, there'll be small
resumption
steps.
of Nathula is also
exactly resumption of Nathula. Then it will start moving ahead. But these are cautious steps, small steps by both sides. But at least it indicates that there is a desire to start improving the relationship.
Let's just get you more on that official from the Chinese Defense Ministry who's confirmed that stabilizing China-India military relations and peace along the India-China line of actual control are common expectations from both sides.
定中印两军关系，维护边境地区的和平安宁，是中印两国人民的共同期许。 尽管两军关系还面临一些困难和障碍，但我们愿以两国领导人的重要共识为指引，加深了解，增进互信，妥处分歧，不断积累两军关系健康稳定发展的正能量。
The official also spoke about Asia's first Nobel Prize winner and Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore's visit to China, voicing support for rapprochement between the two countries. The official added that Rabindranath Tagore had always considered China his home.
我是搬不走的邻居，古有往来互鉴之史实，今有共同发展之期盼。我记得习主席访印时曾讲过这样一个故事。 90多年前，印度的诗人泰戈尔访问中国，受到了中国人民的热情欢迎。一踏上中国的土地，泰戈尔就说：“不知出于什么缘故，我到了中国，就像到了自己的故乡。”
Joining us now live from Hong Kong is Andrew K.P. Leung. He's an international and independent strategist. Thanks so much for joining us, Mr. Leung. We've seen a lot of coverage in India, in the media, of this summit, informal summit as it's being called. There has been a change in tone on how China's media has covered it. But today's People's Daily, I'm a little bit curious about. The front page has complete coverage of Xi Jinping's visit to the Three Gorges Dam, and this summit is on page 3 somewhere on the right.
Hello. Yeah.
Just your comments on how the Chinese media has been treating this summit.
Well, I think that this has been viewed as very, very positive. Because new thinking is required in what President Xi Jinping terms a new era. As you can see, the dynamics are changing all over the place. The North Korean Peninsula and the relationship between the United States and other countries, and of course India and China, the leading nations in the but are lots of issues on corporate, but
Right, we're having a problem with that communication line with you, Mr. Leung. I'll just come back to you. Ambassador, since he was talking to us from Hong Kong now. Again, we've been told expectation management, nothing, no outcome-centric expectations should be there. It's going to be understanding specific. But vis-a-vis Hong Kong, now, leaders at this level would not be talking about micro issues, say like the extradition of Nirav Modi, would they?
Well, it's difficult to say what the leaders would go into. And in the course of the conversation, different things can come up. But clearly, that is not the main purpose of the meeting. And the main purpose of the meeting is to set a new tone for the relationship. So that will be the focus. But once the leaders are talking, they can discuss anything.
Anything. Now, the three other issues that at least the public or analysts like us would look at were the NSG stalling that China had come, UNSC, where Masood Azhar is not being proclaimed a terrorist as well. Those issues, will they be handled later after this tone is set?
I think so. I think there are two things here. One is both Xi Jinping and Modi are politically savvy. And if I may just pick up on what you said about People's Daily, where Xi Jinping is on the front page, the amount of coverage that Xi Jinping is getting from the Chinese media is far, far higher than his two predecessors. He's getting on a rough count 5,000 reports a year from the official media. Whereas his immediate predecessor, Hu Jintao, used to get 2,000 and Chiang Kai-shek used to get 3,000. So they're just telling you. And of course, the meeting with India has come on page 3. So that, I'll just, as an aside, tell you how, but both are politically savvy. Both will also be looking to see how they can use the summit for boosting their domestic standing. So I think that
with elections coming up in India, you wouldn't want a Doklam-like situation that could be politically disastrous.
And there, Xi Jinping, there are some cracks appearing, objecting to the lifting of tenures on the post of president and vice president, etc. He would like to calm things down.
Sure.
So that's one. But the second, as you said, on NSG, well, that's something on which there can be discussion. On terrorism, I think the Chinese have just 3 days ago come out quite clearly signaling that there will be no change by saying that the world must defend Pakistan's track record on combating terror. I think that's a no-no. They've also, their defense minister has assured the Pakistan Navy chief that
very poetic language as
we'll guarantee
used in the
security for CPEC. So I think the Pakistan-China equation has been kept out of it. At least they've signaled that.
Sure.
But other areas, let us see.
Other areas, in fact, I think we have re-established that line with Andrew Leong. You were talking about a change in tone. Can we expect anything on the economic, business, trade front?
Yes, I think on the economic front, there are many areas where both China and India could see eye to eye. For example, both countries would like to embrace this rule-based international trading system defined by the WTO, defined by international trade rules, and then even bilateral or multilateral agreements would be there to stay rather than being torn up at will. So I think that both countries would like to play a role in safeguarding the international economic system, which have served both countries so well. Secondly, I think that there is an area where both countries should are looking into areas where benefits can be brought to both sides. It's not easy because the economic model of China is very different from the economic model of India, and both have a different internal political considerations. But nevertheless, for example, in terms of bringing higher standards of living to their people, creating more jobs, and then in a world where boundaries don't count in terms of e-commerce, in terms of financial investments, in terms of even sharing the kind of strength in the international production and supply chain. For example, cars could be manufactured both in China, of course, and also on India. But then if you look at a car, a lot of the components and parts and even software is manufactured by different countries around the globe. So I think both sides could also share partnership in this area. And of course, there are a lot to say things like energy, both in terms of energy security, green energy, and related issue of climate change under the Paris Agreement. So I think both sides have
the three E's you're mentioning there, Mr. Economics, energy, and ecology. Just to talk about where they could also find common ground in the threatened trade wars with the U.S., with both the U.S. and China staring down at each other, and it's globalism versus protectionism. That would be an area that they would share views on that subject?
Yeah, I think that this is, of course, a potential trade war is brewing. But and with this delegation led by the very famous China hawks in the team, though it doesn't bode too well. But on the other hand, both the United States and China are intertwined economically. If you look at the production of even the Apple mobile phones in China and elsewhere, a lot of the components, the intellectual property comes from the United States or other advanced countries, including Japan and South Korea. And China is making very, very little money out of that. But in spite of that, the production, of course, creates a lot of jobs. And then, of course, if you look at the e-commerce, where China is now emerging to be a global kind of giant in e-commerce, again, both sides could cooperate. And in terms of research, for example, health, healthcare, and sort of biotechnology, involving a lot of data mining, which is easier to be done on China rather than the United States. So I think that both sides have a lot to talk about as well.
Andrew K.P. Leung, an international and independent strategist, thank you so much for joining us from Hong Kong with your views. Ambassador, the things that can converge, that we can collaborate on in terms of investment, whether it's manufacturing, e-commerce was also mentioned there, IT sector. Where do you see that going forward?
So the economic aspect will be interesting because we have a huge trade deficit with China. And we've been trying for some time and to persuade the Chinese to address that imbalance. So far, we have not succeeded very much. There would certainly be some advantage for us in getting Chinese investments in India because China is surplus in capital. But at the same time, we have to ensure that the kind of investment that happens in India does not cause us security concerns. China today is having a problem at the global level in terms of its trade and investment relationships. The National Security Strategy document of the US and the National Defense Strategy document brought out in January this year have said that China indulges in predatory economic practices. Western companies in China have soured a bit on China because what they feel are restrictions on market access, restrictions on investment. So they have launched a major campaign to restrict Chinese investments in the US. And while trade can be disruptive, and even Europeans, Japanese, and India on the trade and tariff issue have positioned closer to China's. In terms of Chinese high-tech investments in the US and in Europe, that is coming under increasing scrutiny. As a result of all this, the present global supply chain will be disrupted. And therefore, for India, there will be new opportunity in terms of how do we link with the new patterns that may emerge with Europe, with the United States, and then to see if there's new opportunity with China to address some of our concerns. So I think that's phase in a stage of flux. And so through this dialogue, if we can start a process of re-looking at the economic relationship to address India's concerns, that would certainly be a positive step.
A state of flux which needs a re-look. Ambassador and Mr. Ranade, do stay with us. We'll keep getting more reactions to what's coming up. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will hold an informal two-day summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping in the central Chinese city of Wuhan. The country's Vice Foreign Minister received the Indian Prime Minister at the airport, and he was then taken in a convoy of 28 vehicles to his hotel in Wuhan. The two leaders are seeking to reset bilateral ties after the Doklam crisis in August last year. Before leaving for China, the Prime Minister in a statement said he hopes to discuss a range of bilateral issues of global importance with the Chinese leader. Despite the informal nature of the summit, both leaders are expected to spend a considerable amount of time with each other. Reports suggest they could meet each other 6 times separately over the next 2 days. The possibility of a reset of India-China ties has evoked a reaction from Pakistan. Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Islamabad has issued a statement saying the friendship between China and Pakistan is time-tested. Joining us live from Wuhan is Palki Sharma Upadhyaya. Palki, everyone is saying it's the tone and tenor that has to be looked at. This is not outcome-centric, this is understanding-centric.
Right, and the tone and tenor will be as conveyed by both sides, because the media will not have access, not even the officials from both sides will have access. It's just the leaders and the interpreters who are going to have a one-on-one conversation later this afternoon. So we'll have to see what comes out of it. But in terms of the symbolism, this is significant. Both Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping taking a walk in the park, going for a boat ride. In terms of pictures and the message that is being sent out, this is going to be very, very powerful. What is delivered in tangible terms on the various issues that are significant for both sides will have to be seen, not just in the days but months ahead. Perhaps there's another visit lined up by the Indian Prime Minister to China. That's for the SCO summit. So this is going to be work in progress, and we're being told that this is just the beginning.
You were talking about that walk in the park and a boat ride. Lead us through what we can expect today.
Today there's a first round of informal talks between the two leaders. That's just between them and their interpreters, as I said, because language is a barrier that both sides are working to overcome. But for the moment, they'll need interpreters. Then there is another meeting. According to one headline, I can tell you, Amitabh, they're going to be meeting 6 times in 24 hours, and that tells you something of the level of engagement there will be. The second meeting may have the delegation from both sides present to thrash out various issues, various differences possibly. They've not spelt out a clear agenda, but I'm sure they have it in their minds and they know what the talking points are going to be. There's a special dinner for the Indian Prime Minister later this evening, and tomorrow again he will be going for that boat ride on the East Lake and another walk in the park. So this is going to be Prime Minister Modi's session to understand where the Chinese come from, what are their issues, what they want to discuss. And this is not just a bilateral not just the bilateral issues that are in focus here. They are looking at the world in general. They're looking at which direction the world is taking. They're looking at assuming the driver's position when it comes to global platforms like the WTO and the United Nations. So they believe that it's time for India and China to take the lead, and this is where they're making the beginning.
Palki, stay with us because we are joined in our studios, continuing our coverage all through the day by Arun Singh, former senior Indian diplomat, and Jaydev Ranade, President for the Center for China Analysis and Studies. Ambassador Singh, when you were talking about Pakistan and the issue of Masood Azhar or terrorism, now China has its own concerns with terrorism in the Muslim Uyghurs. Would you see in the days, weeks, months ahead India being able to pressurize China to act on Pakistan in terms of terrorism, whether it's both in India or in Afghanistan?
So I don't see that happening beyond a point. What Pakistan has done is that they have worked to provide cooperation to China against terrorist groups and elements that China sees as attacking them. And not just China, they've adopted a similar approach, for example, in the context of the United Kingdom. And therefore the UK tends to be not so critical of Pakistan and its involvement with various terrorist groups. So here, I think first, China feels that it needs Pakistan as a strategic partner. It's a way for them to keep India challenged. They give them military supplies. People have pointed out that they are responsible for Pakistan's nuclear and missile program. And
I was reading somewhere 60% of Chinese arms exports Pakistan, Myanmar and Bangladesh. And
today Pakistan's major dependence on imported arms is from China.
Yeah.
So, and then China is looking at the Gwadar port as a future potential for its capacities. Therefore, they would certainly not want to pressurize Pakistan beyond the point. But they would want satisfaction from Pakistan against groups that are threatening China. And Pakistan has worked to provide that. And whenever any group has threatened China, Pakistan has taken action. You would recall that some years ago, General Musharraf took action against the groups based in Lal Masjid. Only after they had attacked some Chinese nationals. So that's the equation. And I think China's whole effort would be that protect Pakistan, but make sure that on your interest you get cooperation from them. So long as they do that.
I'll get your thoughts on that, Mr. Ranade. Let me go back to Palki in Wuhan. Palki, there are many areas where India and China can see eye to eye, especially on the global trade and the threat of trade wars between the US and China, protectionism, globalism.
There are very many issues, and that is going to be the focus, I understand, Amitabh. They're looking at, of course, there are problems, of course, there are differences, but they are going to be focusing on the points of convergence. As the foreign minister's statement last Sunday said, that collaboration and not confrontation is the way forward, and that is what they're going to work towards. Another issue that both the Chinese and the Indian side have highlighted is the people-to-people contact. They say diplomats sometimes cannot achieve what people can, and so they're looking at the language Hindi, they're looking at Bollywood, they're looking at a personal cultural connect. And I can tell you, I'm standing at a yoga center here. There are 6 of this company itself in Wuhan. There are more than 30 across China, and we are told that yoga is very, very popular among the Chinese. And this is another way of building a connect of the peoples of the two countries coming together. Wuhan also has something called the Wuhan University, where a lot of Indian students study, and we spoke to some of them who said that it's been very easy for them to adjust here. The people are very friendly. The only problem is that the food sometimes can be spicy. So the coming together of the citizens of the two countries is another way to cement ties, and that is going to be an area that I believe both governments will work towards.
Right, Mr. Ranade, soft diplomacy. There are about 20,000 Indian students in China, nothing compared to what is there in the US. I think there are 14 sister cities or provinces. There are about more than 40 flights between the two countries. Palki was mentioning Bollywood. Now, that's probably not intended, but like even in Afghanistan, there's huge amount of popularity for the films, and through them, India's position as well. How much can India use soft diplomacy, and how much more should it intend to use it, like Bollywood? We're hearing of Amir Khan possibly being appointed as a brand ambassador because of Dangal.
Well, the soft diplomacy, as you call it, is of course a very useful tool, a very useful thing to move ahead with in most countries. As far as China is concerned, there are certain obstacles in the sense that they limit the number of foreign movies that can be shown in their cinema halls per year to, I think, 13 in the number. So naturally Indian movies have to compete for that, unless we are able to have a separate agreement whereby they allow a certain number of Indian pictures to come in. The Bollywood industry would be very interested in that, because they'll reap a lot of financial benefit.
Right.
But of course, having said that, let me say that Indian movies are very popular, the few that are shown there. The second thing is people to people. We have a lot of businessmen going there, we have a lot of people going there, but there are again limits, you know, as you talk to most
ease
people,
of visas maybe at some point of time, maybe not at this level.
But as they say, people to people, people on both sides are nice, you know, people in both countries, they're fairly simple, hospitable people, ours and theirs. It's at the bureaucracy, at the level of the bureaucrats that you have the problems. That's what everyone says. But then the interests that they represent are different. So I think people to people, it's easier said than done. You know, after all, the Chinese have their own aspirations.
Sure.
And if you look at where they travel to destinations that are approved by their government, which uses tourism as a kind of economic weapon, if I may use the term.
Especially in countries like the Maldives. Where
exactly, and you saw what happened in the Philippines, so that kind of thing. So yes, we will benefit if tourism comes here, but then there's also, you know, some problems that accompany it.
Sure.
So we'll have to look at it, but soft diplomacy, soft power is certainly very useful.
Very useful.
I think we can also look at other things like our radio, like our television being beamed out. That may be also good.
Mr. Ranade and Ambassador Singh, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts with us. Well, another area of concern or collaboration that could take place is the volume of bilateral trade between India and China, which rose by about 15% in the first quarter of this year. Molly Gambhir takes a closer look at the trade equations between the two countries and the importance of the partnership between India and China.